I'm Paul Hickin, Chief Economist and Editor-in-Chief at Petroleum Economist, and we are taking it to the max today. We are talking OPEC plus and maximum sustainable capacity to start with, and then we're going to get into some the geopolitical shifts that are going on with Trump, China, and how that affects OPEC plus. I'd like to start with Amena Bakr, Head of Middle East Energy and OPEC plus research at KPLER, to kick us off this morning or afternoon if we're in the Middle East. And if you can set the scene and tell us a little bit, about this sort of how this MSC will work, and in terms of how does OPEC Plus provide credibility and signal when you've got sort of these two sort of tensions in the group between those that have got extra capacity and those that are kind of hitting a wall.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much, Paul, for that. As you clearly kind of laid out, this year is a very important year for OPEC Plus because the group is going to go under the process of evaluating all the capacities of the members. I don't think there's a disagreement so far because all members agreed that this capacity, they're going to have it audited by an independent company. It's a US company for the majority of member states. And then another company is also going to be contracted for member states that are under sanctions that can't have interactions with US companies. And in Iran's case, they chose the path of having 3 months of this year as an average for their production capacity. So that's the process here. And I think it's really important to do this at this time because there have been always questions around how much capacity do these countries hold? How much spare capacity does the entire group have? And based on that, in 2027, they are going to be reassigning the baselines for each country based on the findings of this audit. It's going to be a fair process. They all agreed to it. And yes, I do realize that, some countries might be shocked, surprised, maybe by the findings, but it's a process they all agreed to. And I think as observers here, we're probably going to be surprised by how much spare capacity is left. I think much of the time we think that, there is infinite spare capacity, that OPEC is always going to jump in if we have a massive supply outage somewhere in the world. But reality is, this immediate spare capacity in the group is being held by maybe 2 or 3 countries.
Yeah, that's a great point. Choeib, Energy Advisor and CEO of Ranadrill Consulting. If I can bring you in on this topic, and do you see this ultimately being this change in the system because it's been a decade or more in the making, this kind of how does OPEC Plus create the credibility for the market to send the right signals that was focused on, and how OPEC Plus are so concerned. They want to send the right signals. They want to show that they're providing stability. And this is a mechanism, arguably, that hopefully helps to provide that credibility. Do you see that being the way this will pan out?
Oh yeah, good morning, Paul. I think this is a good thing. This mechanism is to control any member, every member, his production and his capacity also. So I think this should be done. I think, and it should be done previously, I believe. And this is, I think, to avoid, because as you know, many countries sometimes they were exceeding the capacity. Kazakhstan, for example, was exceeding. Iraq, for example, I think was exceeding. So I think these kind of mechanisms will control the capacity of every member, each member. But let me talk about the OPEC and the challenges maybe the OPEC now is facing. There are many challenges. Geopolitics are really affecting the OPEC, let's say, vision in the future, and what's happening now in Latin America and Venezuela, especially what's happening now in negotiations between United States, Ukraine, and Russia, and if there will be a peace agreement in the region, how that the capacity will be could be increased or sanctions will be lifted on Russia. And I think, and the trade war negotiations, I think, between the United States and China, I think all of this is really affecting the vision and how the strategy, the OPEC will manage situation in the future. You know, we are in the Q1 and the demand is not really strong. And if we compare the prices to 1 year ago, prices dropped with more than 20%. But talking about oil, and so the OPEC can put a strategy on the future and the prices and the quota and how to control the quotas of every each member. I think we need to know what's really happening in other, let's say, between brackets, competitive energies, what's happening in natural gas, what's happening in renewables. Give you just an example. In TTF in Netherlands, the prices dropped with more than 41%. I'm talking about spot prices for natural gas. And this is a signal for the OPEC that natural gas, we have, let's say, a strong supply, especially from the United States and from Norway. And if we talk also about renewables, China, for example, in 2025, increased its capacity to 1.2 terawatt of electricity. Europe, for example, reached the record production of electricity, generated electricity for, let's say, 49% from renewables. So these energies, natural gas and renewables, are really strong, and the demand, and let's say the production is increasing, and this is competing the market share of the OPEC. So I think now talking about mechanism, but this mechanism alone will not put the OPEC safe in the future. There are, so let's say, competitive energies are soaring in China, in many countries in the world. China, as you know, is increasing its production of electric vehicles, and they are threatening the market share of oil. And I think this is what the OPEC should take into account, is what's happening in other energies, renewables, natural gas, and also in the geopolitics, how they really will impact the global energy supply.
Thanks, Choeib. And you're taking me back to that old adage about OPEC and when does OPEC start work? Why is OPEC like a tea bag? It only starts working when it's in hot water. And we're in a situation now, Sara Akbar, if I can bring you in, Chairperson and CEO of OiLSERV for Kuwait. We're in a situation where, there's all this talk of a glut going into, and as Choeib mentioned, the demand for oil has been put into question a little bit more. How does this maximum sustainable capacity and these more robust measures that OPEC Plus strengthen the group, or does it expose some of the more fault lines within the group as well, given that this situation with supply and demand balances?
Well, good morning, Paul. Good morning, all of you. What is special about OPEC and OPEC Plus? They have been very resilient and very flexible and very agile in making decisions and correcting path as they go. And so the situation today is, very turbulent as there's big changes occurring in the world. And I think it is mostly driven by this new strategy for energy dominance and affordability strategy of the US. Now, you see, I really like science fiction movies and futuristic kind of movies. And the situation in the world today is exactly as if we are in one of those movies, because everybody's fighting for resources and for survival. And it's become very, very strange kind of environment that we are living, where you can take hijack tankers overseas and take the oil, and you can demand, and so we are living in a complete different world, and this world is dominated by power. Having said that, I think in the past few years, OPEC Plus has been very wise in the way they made their decisions and in the way they put the group together and continue to keep the coherence between the group. Yes, there are elements in the group where people fight over, and they, for example, when Iraq demanded more capacity and they were threatening to leave OPEC, it never happens, because they all realize that their mission is actually to keep the energy security of the world and to make sure that there is big flow of energy to everybody at affordable prices. I mean, to them, $60 is affordable and it should be the base. So that's why I believe, because the way it has been managed systematically through even turbulent times, even with this turbulent time, they will continue and they will manage this going forward.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a great point. I'd like to bring Amena on this as well, which is we've got this new shift in dynamics for OPEC Plus. It's got the sort of Trump Mark II has, the gloves have come off, so to speak. You've got this dynamic with China, and this kind of sort of shifting battle between China and the US in one way, and the way the US is acting slightly differently. How does OPEC Plus manage Trump earlier talking about now $50 oil again? And the pressure that he may place on the Middle East, the pressure that he's obviously directly placing on Venezuela. How do you see all these kind of shifts playing out with OPEC Plus, and how does it navigate these kind of geopolitical alliances and shifts?
Let's make something clear, Paul. Nobody can manage Trump, and nobody knows what Trump's next move with. And I absolutely agree with something Sara said. We're living in a science fiction movie, and sorry, it's a really bad movie as well. Every single day we wake up to something we thought would never ever happen. So we're living in this constant kind of turbulent times where nobody can predict what would happen the next hour, let alone the next day. So, of course, OPEC, like everybody else living in this world, has the challenge to deal with all this, all these changes, all these statements. But it's also really, really important to kind of differentiate between what Trump does and what Trump says. Okay, the action that he took in Venezuela is shocking. I'm even questioning if it's really legal for him to go in and take in a president and send him to New York with his wife and imprison him and so on. But that's a different story. That's not my kind of area to comment about. But what he said around Venezuela's energy sector and Venezuela's oil and U.S. involvement in extracting more of Venezuelan production and wanting oil prices to be $50. Let's not forget that this year is a midterm election year. Of course, he's going to say that. And he is going to want, the U.S. consumer to feel that he's doing something for them to have lower prices. And he doesn't care about oil prices. He cares about gasoline prices. And there's a difference between the two. And in terms of what he said around Venezuela's, boosting their capacity to 2 million barrels or 2.5, going back to the kind of 1970s peak era for Venezuela, that's going to take a very long time. How long do we have for Trump to stay in office? 3 years, right? What happens after these 3 years? Are we going to get another administration that supports everything? Is this enough confidence for US companies to go in and spend billions of dollars to extract really expensive tar-like oil out of the ground? So these are all questions. I'm not finding, US companies lining up and being very excited about this. They understand the challenges. I'm not saying that, Venezuela's production is not capable of growing. Yes, but not to the extreme impact or the extreme scenarios that Trump is saying. And OPEC officials, delegates and countries, they are veterans, Paul, in this sector. This is their sector. This is the upstream sector. They understand all of these factors. So there isn't this panic mode that, oh my God, yeah, Venezuela is going to supply the market and flood the market even more. Currently oversupplied. So that's why there's no kind of knee-jerk reaction from OPEC. There's no discussion within the group, even at that last meeting. They keep politics out of policy. They look at fundamentals, and this is something very key. And I think OPEC is very careful in continuing that policy looking forward.
Thanks, Amina. Choeib, if I can talk a little bit, get your views on a little bit of this, because like OPEC Plus has to, manage the market, yet you've got, how does Venezuela, as one of the founding members of OPEC, how does that play into their dynamic with OPEC now that you've got Trump so directly and US so directly involved? And what does this say about, sanctioned crude, how, Russia, Iran, some of these other members, well, some and some aren't subject to quotas, but how does that play out in the dynamics here for OPEC plus?
Yeah, I think it's very tight, and this will depend if we take into account the Trump's declaration that he will control the oil in Venezuela. I think this will be a big change. We'll have a big change in the global, let's say, the global market of oil. And talking about the increase in the production of Venezuela in a very short time, let me inform you that I had the chance to work in Venezuela in the oil sector. I was working in Venezuela. And I think it's not easy. It's not easy at all to increase the production in Venezuela in a very short time because of many reasons. The infrastructure is not really strong there, and they have some specification there. The oil in Venezuela is very heavy. It means when we produce oil in the oil fields in Venezuela, you need to import naphtha, to import light oil. You mix it with the heavy oil, so you can transport it, you can pump it to the coastal region. And this is a big challenge. So you need to get light oil or naphtha, you need to import it or you need to produce it in Venezuela, but Venezuela doesn't have big reserves of light oil. And this is a big issue. So I think talking about increasing the production in a very short time, this is very difficult. And could be like political, let's say, declaration. And talking about the fields, talking about the infrastructure, talking about how the capabilities of Venezuela, and talking also about the specification of this oil, heavy oil. There are few refineries in the world can refine the Venezuelan oil. You have in China few refineries, and you have in Louisiana, and you have in Texas. The number of refineries can really, let's say, can process this oil. Now, if we talk about the OPEC and its OPEC, because everybody has to know that Venezuela is a founding member of OPEC in 1960 with Iraq and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. So now, if we talk about the market share, if any external power, will control the oil of Venezuela, it means that refineries in China will look for another heavy oil that could be from Canada. And in this case, the OPEC will lose a market share, will lose 1 million barrels of oil, which is produced now in Venezuela. And it's very, very tight. So now we are talking about geopolitics, we are talking about politics, but talking about the economics, talking about the prices of oil, I think expectation or the focus, it's very tight to predict from now. And I think now the OPEC has to see development and situation in Venezuela. This is the big question now. Who will control the oil industry in Venezuela? And based on that, we see what can really happen. So now talking about maybe Canada, because it has heavy oil, could be processed in China, or what China can say about that. I remember let's say the last Saturday, when United States took Maduro, and Donald Trump, American president, he said that China can buy the oil from Venezuela, but with the market price. It's like a message that supplies of oil from Venezuela will still running, but it's like a signal to China that you will not anymore buy discounted oil from Venezuela. And this, I think, part of a trade war between the United States and China is to cut the wings of China, its expansion to Latin America, and stop China buying discounted oil from Venezuela, from Iran, and from Russia. So that's why they will keep China under the law.
Yeah, it seems, to put not a finer point, a little bit of a mess, a geopolitical mess right now. If we can turn to the survey question, and bring up the survey question, and get it back to fundamentals now as we wade through the geopolitics. A couple here to answer. OPEC Plus like to keep oil output policy unchanged through 2026. Do people agree or disagree? I mean, it's a minefield. The second question being OPEC Plus to abandon price maximization strategy for market share strategy in transition to MS, or maximum sustainable production capacity in 2027. That's if you buy into the argument that they have a price maximization strategy right now, which I'm not sure they do necessarily, but maybe while we're asking that, maybe Amena, you can come in here and comment on those. What's your views on that survey question?
Sure. No, I think they're loaded questions, almost a little bit leading questions,
Yes.
or they assume their own facts. I think, I mean, for the time being, there isn't really a focus on targeting a certain price level. We're in very challenging times. I mean, Q1 is a super challenging period for the group, and that's why they're not adding additional increments. That's why they chose to pause during this period to see what happens with this surplus. And then following that, I mean, the expectation is that by the second quarter, third quarter, demand is going to kick in, and that's when they can proceed with the continuing of the unwinding of the voluntary cuts. I think the intention very much is to get rid of these voluntary cuts, is to go through the assessments of the maximum sustained capacity, and to start a new policy in 2027 where countries that have invested in their spare capacity or their capacities in general are recognized, are given kind of a bigger share, and others are encouraged to continue investing in their capacities.
Yeah, and on that note, Sara, if I can bring you in, on that survey question, do you see OPEC Plus being in a position to continue unwinding unwinding at some point through the year? You know, what's your view on the glut and how whether OPEC Plus can continue, and does it put it in a better position vis-a-vis the maximum sustainable capacity if it can get everyone out of these cuts for now?
Yeah, I think, the objective of getting out of these voluntary cuts is an objective, and they want to achieve that. And they are banking on the demand increase in 2026 in order to be able to, bring those barrels back into the market. Now, of course, if we know that, as Amena said, this year, midterm elections. So, and one of the main objectives of the administration is to keep the prices down so that they can win the midterm elections, which is crucial for them. Because, I mean, you saw President Trump saying to the Republican senators that if we don't win, I will be impeached. So it is for them survival thing. So that's why I think this year it will be very tough to keep the prices where OPEC wants it, and there will be challenged with that. So this is one area. But the other area is now if the strategy of the US is to dominate the energy market, which the main player for a long time who dominated the market was OPEC. So it is a direct challenge to OPEC Plus itself. And I think when they are threatened by this kind of challenge, I think they will consolidate more and be, many countries in the world today, they do not like what they see. But of course, they don't talk about it, but they really don't like what they see because power dominance is not something that people swallow easily. And that's why I think this will bring OPEC Plus more closer in decision making, which means if the prices go down, something they really don't want because they cannot afford to, then these extra barrels will not see the market this year because they would like to keep a certain price that keeps them going on. But yeah, it's definitely they want to be able to produce everything they have. And I agree with Amena, there isn't much spare capacity left anyway. I mean, few countries do have that spare capacity that they can put back into the market. On the longer term, within the next 3 years, yes, potentially there is more capacity to be put on the market, but in the short term, I don't believe there is much that can be added.
Sure, but if I can bring you in as well, and how do you see this year playing out for OPEC plus? Given especially we haven't really mentioned so much in terms of fundamentals, the China's strategy of what it was doing last year, which was, buying for its strategic reserves. Do you see that playing out and playing a role in terms of helping OPEC out? Does these potentially lower prices, this glut in the early part of the year, potentially, if there is a glut, that's another loaded question there. But if there is extra supply, does actually slightly lower prices help OPEC Plus out in the near term and squeeze those shale producers and give a bit more leeway further down in the line in 2026? How do you see those fundamental dynamics of China and the price playing out for OPEC Plus?
Yeah, to be honest, I think there is a surplus now in the market. If it was not surplus, based on what happened in geopolitics in Venezuela, the prices could spike, but we didn't see any impact. Prices were like 61, they dropped to less than $60. So I think that we have that surplus is absorbing geopolitics, what's happening in geopolitics at the moment. What happened yesterday also, that the Americans just took one vessel oil tanker, Russian oil tanker, but we don't see any impact on oil prices. Even Russia is the second largest producer of the OPEC plus. So I think that surplus, even it's not maybe too much large, but that surplus is absorbing the shockwave at the moment in the global market. So talking about prices, I think we don't have Q1 and Q2. This is my opinion anyway. I don't see a reason to increase, let's say, to unwind more in Q1 and Q2, because there is, let's say, situation is not really clear. We don't have a strong demand in the market at the moment. And in other side, we have, let's say, increasing production out of the OPEC. Let's say the United States in September, let's say, had a record production of 13.85 million barrels of oil. Brazil is increasing its production. Guyana is producing 0.9 million barrels of oil per day, and its target is to increase its production to 1.5 million barrels before 2030. So these are some challenges. We have the production out of the OPEC, which is increasing. That's why the OPEC now has to think seriously about this. It has to unwind its capacity, to unwind its oil. This is one point. And the second challenge now, the OPEC is facing is geopolitics. When we talk about geopolitics, we talk about Venezuela as a member of the OPEC. Who will control the oil of Venezuela? So, and this is a big challenge. What will happen between Russia and Ukraine? Yes, Russia, maybe they will lift sanctions on Russia and will allow it to pump maybe more oil to the market. And let's say could really flood the market with oil. And I think there's are many challenges. So Q1 and Q2, I think it's not a real time, the good time to unwind more barrels. This is my opinion anyway. But the ideal time for me is the Q3, where demand will increase based on the vacations and demand on oil increase. I think that could be a good time for OPEC to plan ahead and to see how to unwind more barrels. And they have to take the opportunity to unwind more and more. But as Sara said and Amena said, who is able to increase his production? Maybe a few, 2-3 countries only can increase production. And with coming this system now has been set by the OPEC now, I think this system can really make a clear vision or strategy for the OPEC in the future. And based on that, I think that we'll have more strategy, more clear vision in the future, and let's see what will happen.
No, that's a good point. Quick last words from both Sara and Amena, if I can get you both in. Last thoughts, Sara. I mean, seems to be the message that in the face of adversity, OPEC are going to come through stronger. The MSC is going to help provide that strength and clarity for the market as well. Is that your take, Sara?
Right, like we have a polarized world politically, I think we will have a polarized world from an oil point oil and gas point of view, because you have OPEC-plus and whatever they're trying to do over the last 60, 70 years. And then now we have a new emerging entity that's trying to take control over energy in the world. So yeah, we have a polarized world, and my opinion, OPEC-plus will win the day.
Thank you. And Amin, a quick last word from you, please.
Sure. No, I'll end with a former OPEC Plus minister once told me, why do members stay in the OPEC Plus group despite it being a very dysfunctional family? So I asked him, okay, yeah, why are you staying? Why doesn't everyone leave? He said, we're staying because of the kids. I said, who are the kids? He said, it's the oil. So I think OPEC Plus is going to stay together because of the kids.
Thank you. Great little anecdote to finish off, Amena. Amena, Sara, Choeib, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you.